welcome YouTube. All right, this is Conversations. Oh, sorry, we gotta redo this start. Okay, you guys get to see the behind the scenes stuff. All right, welcome back to Conversations with the Mind. I'm your host, as always, Shane Lemaster, and I'm here with a very special guest, Kevin Matthews.
Hey, Shane.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, especially on this on the coattails of this amazing news, this amazing historical breakthrough election that we had in Denver last week for the Initiative 301, the decriminalizing of psilocybin mushrooms. Now, I believe that's only in Denver County, though,
That's right.
correct?
City and County of Denver.
City and County of Denver. So, for our listeners, welcome, and we will, we'll get into that pretty deeply here in a minute. But I want to start off the podcast the same way I start every podcast, which is asking the same question I do to every guest. And that question is, what does the phrase "conversations with the mind" mean to you? The listeners know what that means to me and why I put this podcast together. And I'd like to just get a sense from every guest as far as like how that resonates and how it sits with you.
Yeah, it's the first time anyone's ever asked me a question like that, Shane. So it's pretty great, and I think it's really really relevant to the work that we've done as a campaign over the last, for some of us, a year and a half. And so much of the work that we've done started out as an idea and started out as a conversation and really exploring what's possible here. And then over time, I mean, linking, like each mind is a node of consciousness. And as those nodes connect, we start to interlink and collaborate and share information. And then from that collaboration and from that communion, we can, with the work that we've done, we've been able to really create something that's blossomed and is going to have an impact on culture for a long time. So I think that, we're always in conversations with ourselves in our own mind, despite how much we may not want to be or how much we try to avoid that. And so it's a good reminder because I'm always in conversation with myself. I'm in conversation with, I try to be as much in conversation with kind of the internal quiet subconscious part of myself that doesn't get acknowledged that often. And then at the same time, creating space to share these kinds of conversations with other individuals has proven to be groundbreaking for us.
That's awesome. I like how you talked about how each person is a different node of consciousness, and what popped in my head immediately was, my background is in psychology, so I visualize the model of the brain, and how if each person is a single neuron, in the brain, a single neuron doesn't do much.
Right.
It's not a major. I mean, it's an important part of consciousness, but all of consciousness from one neuron, right? So it takes all these neurons working together to make this other bigger thing blossom.
Absolutely.
And I like what that's what came to my mind, and it makes total sense. And then tell me more about this quiet space, because that's something that we haven't talked much about on this podcast. I'm familiar with this space through meditation, definitely. Yeah. But I agree with you, that quiet, peaceful, calm, serene space in consciousness that's sort of underlying or overarching everything, that it doesn't get acknowledged. So the other ways that I've described this on the podcast before is sort of like if your thoughts and your mind chatter are like clouds in the sky, this higher state of consciousness is almost like the blue sky. Like if you flew above the clouds, no matter how stormy the clouds are, it's always blue skies above, and it's just calm and serene, right? Like that's this higher level of consciousness, this quiet, serene part of ourselves that here in the West, when I work with people in psychotherapy, this is one of the biggest issues, is that people here in the West have a really hard time sitting with quiet, sitting and doing nothing. We feel like we have to go and do all the time, and we're human beings, we're not called human doings.
Right.
We're supposed to be,
right.
We're supposed to just be in the moment.
Yeah.
I love how you put that. Can you talk a little bit about the quiet space for you? What that's like?
Well, what's what's ironic to me is that sometimes we have to go through the chaos to get there. You know, like through the chaos of our thinking mind, through the chaos of our doing and our tasks and our I guess our daily routines that we go through. And like, I mean, for me personally, I've been working very hard to cultivate that space over the life cycle of the campaign, and it's been honestly been very challenging. Just because with the work that we've done so far, it's been, I've needed to level up, and I think I need to level up a little bit more.
Level up in what?
Well, just level up because now, like, we've hit this new baseline now, where, you know, psilocybin mushrooms are now effectively decriminalized. The last 18 months of work has led to this point, and then now we can take a moment to rest and like breathe and
settle into that quiet space. Like,
yeah, it's like in that quiet space is this new baseline, knowing that there's going to be a lot more work ahead. And so it's, yeah, and I kind of also equate that to some of these larger dose psilocybin experiences where many times we're pushing through the layers of our psyche and our own thinking to, once you kind of peak on the experience, you emerge on top and it gets quiet for a little bit. And at least from my experience, and you're just like wow,
it's a new baseline again.
Yeah, exactly.
So you go through a challenging experience, whether it's psychedelic or not. You know, a survival experience in the wilderness can do the same thing, or a near-death experience. But you reach this new growth, right? This big boom, and then all of a sudden everything's calm, and it's like a new plateau. But you know, you look to the other side of the plateau, and oh shit, the mountain's still there. You know, I still got to keep climbing. But it becomes exciting, you know, the more plateaus you reach, and the more growth that you get with each psychedelic experience too.
Yeah.
I feel like these new baselines is how you measure that growth.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we talk about that a lot on the podcast, is like how it's almost a necessity to go through challenge and struggle and tragedy to get the most growth. You know, I say frequently that I learn way more from my mistakes than I do from my successes.
Absolutely.
And I learn a lot more about facing the challenging parts of myself through like shadow work and psychedelic work like that than I ever do having a novel, fun experience on psychedelics. Like, I used to take them recreational, had a blast, right?
Yeah.
That was all external experience and novel. But now when I turn the lens back inwards, the benefits, there's so much greater depth to it. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
I like it.
I spent years with a Jungian analyst, and this is kind of post my military days when I was still rediscovering what the heck I'm doing with my life. And yeah, just like, 'cause there's so many layers and so many experiences that we have, and so many opportunities to jump into those experiences and really examine them. And then you know, especially with shadow work, like there's so much gold in there if you can unpack it, and like being able to rest in that space. And I think, you know, as a therapist, you know, if someone has trauma, being able to go back and guide that person through being able to sit comfortably in that space of trauma and witness it, and then from what I understand from that experience, it allows a person to gain a new perspective, per se, and then heal.
Yeah, it's almost like providing a safe space to allow someone to feel comfortable enough to re-witness the trauma. But then, I mean, because everyone will tend to go to their initial point of view, point of perspective during the trauma, like if they're re-witnessing, so maybe a first-person perspective. But through work with them, you know, you can help them say, like, okay, this is just one camera angle. Okay, let's shift the camera angle over to the other person, like take their perspective, and what was it like for them? Or what was, you know, can you take a different perspective where you disconnect your own personal emotional ties to it and what it felt like, and try and reprocess it from a different angle.
Yeah. It's fascinating how, as humans, we have the capacity to actually take on these different angles and look at our life from these different perspectives. You know, if there's anything that I've learned from the mushrooms, it's that, you know, we can switch lenses and switch views and check out these things that are important to us or necessary to look at from a new light and a new angle. It's pretty fun.
And so you brought up your military experience, and
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about that,
Yeah.
because I think this ties in really well with what we're already talking about with changing your perspective, especially on things that happened in the past, right?
Sure.
So I don't know much about your military school history. I know that you went to West Point and decided that wasn't for you, so you left. So tell me about the process that led you up to wanting to go to West Point,
Yeah.
what happened at West Point, and what happened immediately after. Because while you're in that experience, like it seems like, we feel lost at times. I have personal experience. I went to a military high school out on the East Coast, Valley Forge Military Academy. And
I'm actually a little bit familiar with Valley Forge.
yeah, nice.
Yeah, I went to New Mexico Military Institute.
I almost went there.
Did you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I went to a military high school and thrived and excelled with the structure and the discipline. But when I got to the higher levels in the ranks, I made first sergeant after my first year, and then I was in charge of 300 kids my age.
Yeah.
In a leadership position, which I did well at. I felt, but I started to look around, and people were getting promoted and getting awards based on who they knew, and not based on what they did. So it was not based on merit, and I was not okay with that system. And I went into military school wanting to prep myself to go to the Naval Academy, then go into SEAL training and stuff like that. And that's what I had dedicated my whole teenage years to doing and training for.
Yeah.
But then once in military school, I saw the bureaucracy and the hypocrisy, and I did not like the system, and just decided for myself, this is not for me, and I dropped out of there. Drugs also played an influence in my decision to drop out. I had been drug-free up until age of 16 because my mom was an alcoholic. My dad was an addict, so I knew it ran in my family. But actually discovered drugs first at military school. First drug I ever did was an LSD trip with some friends. We went to an amusement park. Before I smoked pot or cigarettes or alcohol or anything. So my mind expanded to these molecules, and I went home for like a Christmas break and did some other interesting substances with some friends, some MDMA and ketamine, and just decided like, hey, I can't continue to be interested in these molecules and also be in a structured military school environment, so I'm going to choose to do this. I don't like the systems that they have in place anyway, and so now in my everyday life I try and, engage that side of myself that still thrives for the danger and the thrill seeking and stuff like that through like extreme sports and jiu-jitsu and I want to do skydiving, bungee jumping, and I do firearms training, and so I get to do a lot of the cool stuff that I wanted to do in the military, but in the civilian world. Yeah. And so I feel like, I'd like to hear about your experience too, because all I know is that you also did not like the systems around you that was going on.
Something happened.
Yeah.
And it's cool because we have a shared story there. My plan was to be a career Army officer, and I wanted to branch infantry and go to Ranger School and then apply for Special Forces and see where that took me. And I actually was accepted into the Naval Academy and had the same. If I was going to go to Annapolis, it would have been the SEALs. Army, it was the Green Berets, and that's where what I wanted to do.
I love it. When you hear someone telling your story, it seems like, are you like a different version of me?
Yeah.
Like just playing out a different consciousness? Yeah.
And it's similar. So, I mean, for me, gosh, when I was 9 is when I had made the big decision that I wanted to be in the Army. And I told that to my dad, and he planted a seed, and he said, Kev, if you want to be in the Army, you're smart enough to be an officer, and if you want to be in the Army, the best way to become an officer is to graduate from West Point. And I was like, all right, and that stuck with me for 10 years.
Wow. So your dad implanted a story in your mind, and that story got personalized.
Absolutely.
From the age of 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's so crazy. I feel like that happens to a lot of people, and they don't realize that it happens.
Yeah.
They're like, why did I even end up down this pathway? Was that even my idea? Or was it my parents' idea?
I've questioned that, and it's, I'm very grateful. as well, because my dad worked his butt off too to help me get in there. You know, and in terms of, I think part of getting accepted into any of the service academies also depends a lot on your connections. I mean, you need to have a good academic track record. You need to have a strong extracurricular performance track record, a demonstrated leadership track record, and then, you know, also you're getting interviewed by, you know, senators and congressmen for their panels, and then you get nominated, and then, you know, if you know somebody who's in the administration or something who can write a letter for you, or who's in Congress who can write a letter for you, and like all that stuff helps, in addition to all of the skills that you cultivate as a student and a teenager. And yeah, I never stopped playing Army. I mean, I don't think it was intentionally, can't remember quite the word here, but you know, even in high school, I'd still dress up in fatigues on Halloween and do that. And whenever we'd go on school trips in middle school and high school, like, I was the guy who was always camoing up and going out into the woods and just I don't know, I think, you know, I have a very strong, I believe in this country, and I really felt that, like, for me at that time, I mean, serving my country and waving the banner of freedom was very important to me. And yeah, so I was accepted into West Point in 2005. I mentioned I spent a year at New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, New Mexico, and excelled there. It was because it was my dream. I was living my dream life, even through the suck and like a little bit of the hazing and the
a lot of hazing,
physical corrective training when you don't follow orders and instructions, and you know, kind of the whole model where they're breaking you down and building you back up into the image of a military officer or a service member.
Almost in an abusive way.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly don't account for some of the trauma that occurs going through that kind of an experience.
My roommate in military high school tried to kill himself.
Wow.
He was a transplant from Nigeria. I guess he came from a wealthy family in a government position. Awesome black kid. I forget his name even now, but yeah, the verbal abuse right in your face, yelling, screaming, the physical corrective action, doing push-ups nonstop for hours, or sitting, chair position against the wall with your arms up, for hours on end, and the hazing, getting blanket parties, where they wrap their soap up in their towels and everyone beats you as you get.
I never had to go through that.
Oh yeah, or like even to earn our place in the tribe, we had to go through this cap shield ceremony where people would drag you out of your room in the middle of the night and you had to memorize this honor book, and they would put you up in this room in their lounge and it'd be dark and there'd be people pacing around you and breathing down your neck, and you'd be holding the push-up position while you have to recite the book and like all these abusive things, and some people snapped, and he was one of them. He tried to jump off a second-story staircase and failed in his attempt, but got sent home because of it. So we had a lot of issues like that. A lot of kids left there more traumatized than when they came. It was unfortunate.
I learned a statistic the other day from another former service member friend who said that the rates of veteran suicide it correlates more with simply being in the military than having deployed in the military. So just simply having spent a little bit of time in the military increases the risk for suicidality.
Wow.
Whether or not that person was deployed.
So they don't have to be a combat vet?
They don't have to be a combat vet. They can just have been in the military.
Wow.
Which is, I was shocked when I heard that. I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but I want to look it up and find out, because that's pretty important statistic.
Yeah, especially if any listeners out there are considering military service and you're like, I'm not going to get PTSD because I'm going to be on a ship the whole time, or because I'm going to pick this job where I'm not going to be sent overseas or something. Well, like you said, like it can cause trauma. Just the training and the being broken down in and of itself can be traumatizing. Yeah,
it's and I wonder if that had an impact on me early on at the academy, because when I was at West Point, I was there for 3 years, and it was in the first semester of my third year, my junior year, that things really started to go downhill. That's when I was diagnosed with major depression, and I started, I was on Effexor and a sleeping aid, and I mean, it was, I loved it, and then something switched in my experience, and I, kind of similar to what you were talking about when you were saying how you saw people getting promoted or being able to kind of skirt the rules and weren't getting, weren't getting disciplined for their actions or so because.
Well, and just I was outperforming my peers, and they were getting recognized. I was like, what the hell? Like that's not fair. Like I did my due diligence.
Yeah. So it's, there's a lot of things that happen at West Point. I met my mom. I'm adopted, so my sophomore year, I met my birth mom.
Wow. How old were you?
I was 21 my sophomore year. Nice. So I met my birth mom. You remember the days of AOL Instant Messenger?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got an AIM chat from my dad, and he said, "Hey Kev, your birth mom wants to get in touch with you." I was like, "Whoa."
This is your adopted dad who's reached out to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's my dad.
Cool.
Totally.
Well, I didn't know if you knew your bio dad or not.
I don't know. He actually passed away.
Yeah.
A couple years ago.
I actually, I was raised by a single mom, and numerous stepfathers. One was actually an ex-Navy SEAL, also who got me into the military, or got me interested in the military. But I actually met my dad for the first time when I was 24 as well, so early 20s. And I reached out to him through letter, and met him, spent a week with him, and then never wanted to spend any more time with him. Wow. Sounds like you had a much better experience meeting your mom.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah, she flew out after Thanksgiving. Wow. And we spent just a couple of days together. I had a little bit of leave. And I because it was just, my dad raised me as a single father, and he did an amazing job and instilled a very strong moral compass in me. And I feel like, really looking back on this almost a decade later, I always kind of wonder, like, if I had not met my mom, would I have graduated from West Point? And I'm so thrilled that I did, because I have a mom in my life now too, who's amazing, and two sisters who I didn't meet until then, and so that was powerful. And I think really it was, stuff started going downhill for me kind of psychologically. It was starting like the second semester of my sophomore year. I was 21. You could drink on campus too. There's a strong culture of drinking in the Army and the military in general, right? Just as a way to blow off steam and have fun and kind of break away from the regimentation of living that life. And yeah, I mean, it was a challenging experience. And then grades started to fail, and I started, even though I had this amazing group of friends there, I still felt a little bit like isolated and alone, and I can't really explain why. I was a high performer while I was there, especially my first year at the academy, which is, one of the hardest years, obviously, because that's you have no rank, you're the dust they kick off the bottom of their boots, basically. It's where you are, and I loved it. I loved it. It was exactly where I wanted to be, and then, something switched, and then depression started setting in, and when I got more responsibility, it felt like it was it was just too challenging, I think, to have that much responsibility. I was a platoon sergeant in my junior year, so I had 40 enlisted cadets, pretty much under my command as well, and who I was responsible for. And, with grades and keeping up academic performance and physical performance and military performance, I think it was just a whirlwind of chaos that I couldn't control. And yeah, kind of late in my junior year, I wrote an email to my TAC officer and all of my instructors and said, I'm done. I want to kill myself. I don't want to be here anymore. And when you do that in the military, like, they everything stops. Like they put you on suicide watch, and this was after a couple of months of actually being on Effexor and in psychiatry while being a cadet.
Yeah, did you feel like the psychiatric medications did benefit to you or harm to you?
I don't think it helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My experience with antidepressants is the same. Is that they were not helpful, especially coming off of them, made it 10 times worse.
Yeah.
So I consider myself a psychiatric or pharmaceutical survivor.
Yeah.
Because I don't take any of those now if I absolutely don't need to. It sounds like you had the same experience.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people out there too who are struggling with this mentality in our culture too, to fix everything with a pill, fix everything, but all these pharmaceuticals have really nasty side effects that people don't take into consideration, which is another fantastic reason why we're moving forward on psilocybin. It's one of the least toxic molecules on the entire planet. So this is an amazing breakthrough, and for those people out there who are struggling and on pharmaceuticals, some people feel like they have no other option but to continue taking these things.
Right. Right.
There are other options now.
There are.
And that's so cool. When you left the military academy, what was it like right afterwards? Were you elated with your new found freedom, or were you still in a depressed state?
No, I was still in a depressed state, and I was honestly drinking way too much. I couldn't cope with the fact that the foundation for my entire existence, at the time, I felt had basically crumbled beneath my feet. So it felt like a complete loss of my sense of self.
Identity.
And
gone.
Exactly, gone. Just.
Well, your identity since 9 years old was military, and
so
then
for 12 years, basically, it was, for 12 years.
Wow.
And they're just, like that, away. And in the Army, they did right by me. I'm so grateful for the military to have received a medical retirement from the Army. And I receive a very small pension every month that basically helps cover my phone bill or grocery expenses, which is awesome. And there are some other small benefits as well. I tried to go back to school using the GI Bill, but you can't do that as a former service academy cadet. There's a loophole there where it doesn't apply to academy cadets.
So they want you to finish through their academy, probably?
Well, I forget what it is, because I went through the VA system to try and get some of these benefits, and it was just like one block after another, oh, you got to do it this way, you can't do it this way, and it just didn't seem very cooperative. So I just said, to help that, I'm done with the VA as well. And afterwards I struggled, and then what really the moment that really changed my life at that time was getting a DUI, actually here in Fort Collins. And that's,
welcome back. Just kidding.
I'm glad to come back in a much better way,
Sure. I have 2 DUIs up here, so.
Do you? Yeah. Gosh. But that was wow, I had to completely surrender. And I saw that holy shit, something's not right. This clearly is not working. And I had to surrender to that system and go through that system for 2 years of basically being on probation and going through the classes and losing my license, and all that stuff. But that's the time where that was 2000. I got formally discharged from the Army in December of 2008. It was May of 2008. Wow, 11 years ago now that I actually had my DUI. And so the DUI, I guess I should back up a little bit, because my plan was to, I got sent on medical leave from the Army, and then was going to go back the following semester and start my junior year over again. And in between that time frame, I was seeing a psychiatrist here at the Air Force Academy in the Springs, and that's when I got the DUI, and in that time frame. And so the question was, Kevin, you have a choice now. You can go back to West Point if you want, and face the consequences of your DUI through the military system, or you can basically surrender your appointment to the academy and receive a discharge. And for me, I was like, I am messed up. There is no way I can be responsible for, as an officer, it did not feel integrity for me to be somebody with these kinds of mental issues that weren't being addressed.
It's a very responsible choice for someone in your state to be even able to consider.
It made the most sense to me. I mean, I was a risk, which meant that I'd be putting other men and women at risk, which doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So I was like, I got to figure this out. And so I got out and got discharged. And then floated for a few years and worked odd jobs and lived with my dad for a while, and started kind of getting a little bit into self-help and meditation, and then it was really this one strong psilocybin mushroom experience that really changed the game for me.
So that was going to be my next question, like what is your pathway into the mushroom use? So it sounds like it came after your military school experience, so this is like mid-20s?
Yeah.
Was your very first psilocybin experience? And was it the first one that was the biggest, most profound one that you're referring to? Okay.
Yeah, because it was the first one that that just had me realize that, wait a minute, I'm not alone. I'm not isolated. There's this, I mean, the experience itself was mind-blowing. This deep sense of connection, not only with the people who were around me, this new group of friends, excuse me, and then also feeling this deep sense of connection with the environment that we were in. And I was just like, whoa, this is way different than anything I've ever, even thought about could possibly exist.
And when you're talking about, for those of you out there who are hearing this and you're like trying to picture it because you don't have any experience, when I've taken those mushrooms as well, like it feels like you're in communion or communication with like trees and grass and bugs and like everything in your perceptual field. You all of a sudden have an awareness of your connectedness to them, whereas like in everyday waking consciousness we feel almost a duality, like a separateness from, like that's a tree and this is me. But in that headspace, you can feel like the vibrations coming off of things, and you can feel like, oh, this thing's trying to communicate with me. It doesn't use language, but it's using something else, and I can actually see and perceive this and feel it. And so for those of you out there listening, these medicines and a lot of psychedelic drugs open up pathways in our brains that are always there, but maybe just have not been used for a long time, or we've forgotten how to use since we've lost our imagination in childhood. Right. And then so the reopening of these things sort of shows you again, how curious we really should be around us about everything. It's so cool. So sorry, go on about your experience.
No, thank you. I mean, like really from the blades of grass to the clouds in the sky. Yeah. It was like this just visceral connection and communion and communication and like deep reverence as well for the experience, and the people that I was with who had much more experience than I did were able to hold the space in a very welcoming and, I mean, frankly very effective manner. Just knowing that I'm kind of a newbie in that area, and it was an amazing experience. And it was that 4 to 6 hours. The trip was awesome, but it was really the weeks and weeks and months afterwards that really actually had the most profound effect there. The integration process afterwards, okay, here's what I learned, here's this new reality that clearly exists around me all the time.
Your new baseline plateau.
Baseline plateau, exactly.
It's like I gotta explore and understand this a little bit, get my footing.
Yeah. And so it was like from there, it's when I really realized that I actually had a choice. I didn't have to be a victim to my depression anymore. So
I just want to take a pause here and just share about how important the integration is, right? And this is also something I wanted to bring up on the coattails of 301 passing. people are worried that there's going to be like a flood of illicit drug use or something, and there might be, there might be an initial spike. I anticipate that might happen. It may be in celebratory fashion, but then, it'll eventually peter out and go back down to baseline, just like with cannabis. There was a huge spike in the beginning, and now it's just like a normal thing. Yeah. So with that,
integration.
Yeah, so the integration piece I think is so important, and I'm on the MAPS integration, psychedelic integration provider list for Colorado, mostly northern Colorado. But I think it's important to point listeners of the podcast and people who follow you also, because all these voters are following you on social media, and they're probably going to listen to this podcast, right. And they need to know that, hey, just because it's decriminalized doesn't mean like go out and just have all these recreational experiences with it. The integration process afterwards, with someone who knows what they're doing, like a trained right. integration therapist, or a shaman of some sort. I'm not claiming to be a shaman, but maybe a modern day one or something. But yeah, the integration is almost more important than the experience itself. And without the integration, you maybe only get like 10% of the benefits or the potential that you could. So for you listeners out there hearing this, make sure that, and I'm sure Kevin advocates for this too, make sure you find somebody who knows their way around these headspaces, these altered states of consciousness, who has experienced themselves and who's trustworthy, and find some integration.
Yeah.
Get some therapy afterwards and before.
Yeah. That's a really important point. Mm-hmm. And we're actually very excited because there's this gigantic network that already exists here mm-hmm. along the Front Range, for support, for integration, for harm reduction, for learning how to properly cultivate so that you're doing it correctly and not putting yourself at risk by eating something that isn't what it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So there's this. Even if now like nobody can prescribe this for anyone, no doctors can do that unless you're an end stage patient who's exhausted all the other resources. There are so many people who are ready to come in and plug in right now, who've already been doing this work for a long time, who can assist somebody in the preparation stage and the integration stage. Mm-hmm. They can't necessarily provide psilocybin mushrooms for you, but you can prep your mindset, mm-hmm. which is and your intention behind the experience, which is extremely important. And honestly, I think the best way to utilize mushrooms mm-hmm. as well. And
there's also still there's underground facilitators too, mm-hmm. Doing the work out there. And thank you for all you mm-hmm. facilitators out there doing ethical and good work, because there are some bad apples out there, certainly in any group. But yeah, if so you mentioned there's help in the preparatory stage, there's help in the integration stage, but there's also help in the actual altered state of consciousness, yeah. Right? Like you said, facilitators usually won't provide medicine for you, but if you have obtained medicine and you want they're called sitters. If you want a sitter or facilitator to kind of hold the space and make sure that your physical body is safe during your experience, and you want someone there to hold your hand if you start crying, or you want someone there to help calm you if you find yourself getting deregulated, those people are out there too. You just gotta search them out. Find the others.
Yeah.
So after your initial psilocybin experience, sorry, I just want to touch on that integration piece. We'll probably come back to that. So after your initial psilocybin experience, you get this great integration. You're recalibrating to this new plateau, this new information that you have, mm-hmm. and then in between that experience and the path to decriminalize Denver. How did that unfold? How did that time in between unfold?
Man, I met an amazing woman. We hit it off like immediately, which was awesome. And I started diving into the new age, kind of light worker philosophy for a while. Very interesting, because I went from being very gung-ho military to kind of a little bit more, I guess, passive monk-like in my mid-20s.
Me too. That's when I
know?
found Buddhism.
Exactly.
It like flipped.
It was incredible. Yeah, and so I really started exploring a lot of these more Eastern modalities in terms of studying yoga and studying Zen and learning as much as I could about the nature of the mind and the nature of consciousness, and really starting to dive really deeply into what does all this mean and where is my place in it, and figuring out how to find that spot in myself where I could sit there and rest and like say, okay, here's where I am. I feel good. I'm, I guess some delusions of grandeur and wanting to become enlightened and do that whole thing. When I'm happy that I went down that path, because I don't think it necessarily would have brought me here today. So I ended up really getting into meditation a lot. Every day I'd sit for 30 minutes to an hour and had some tremendous experiences there. And I would oftentimes use cannabis as a tool to help orient myself in that space as well. And I went and got a yoga teacher training certificate as well, and got acquainted with that philosophy and that practice, and just started like, I guess thinking about it now, since I was working without a foundation, I needed to rediscover my essential self, and like what it means to be a human, and what it meant to be, just to get reacquainted with, because my heart was broken, and my mind was broken, and I wanted to figure out why. And as I mentioned earlier, I was with a Jungian analyst for about 3 years, which was, man, my dreams in that time.
In a therapeutic context?
In a therapeutic context, yeah, because I was, I actually took myself off of Fexer.
You did it yourself?
I did it myself.
Wow. It's dangerous.
It is dangerous, and I think that may have. So yeah, please don't do that at home. Wean off any kind of antidepressants if someone feels like that's the choice they want to make. And I wonder if that was more destructive than it was beneficial, but I kept with therapy. I decided that a traditional Western psychiatrist or psychotherapist wasn't the best fit for me, and I wanted to find somebody who can help me really kind of start digging into these unseen layers of my psyche and start to unpack this stuff. And so I was very fascinated by Jung and dream work and shadow work.
Jung's one of my favorites.
He's amazing.
He was taught for maybe a week in my entire
Really?
undergrad. Yeah, I went to CU Boulder, and it was mostly Freudian based.
Okay.
And
You started teaching it.
Yeah,
a little bit.
it was disappointing for me going through. I had to do all my Jungian research on my own, and it didn't make sense because Naropa's right there, right next to campus, right? And like,
Right.
why don't we integrate these? Yeah, I kind of fell off the Western model and went largely in favor of the Eastern and Buddhist models of the mind,
Yep.
and Jungian psychology, and yeah, I like that you were engaging that.
Yeah, I really miss it.
Yeah.
So it was that, and at the time I was working at a health club, front desk, and had risen the ranks from front desk guy to manager on duty, and got a sense of responsibility again, kind of getting back into another leadership position, and then I actually went and worked with both my wife and I before we were married. We both went and started working for what is it? It's called. It was an outdoor at-risk youth rehabilitation.
Like a wilderness therapy.
Mm-hmm. Wilderness therapy.
That's how my wife and I met.
Really?
Not a wilderness therapy,
Okay.
but we both were working at a residential facility for at-risk youth girls.
Okay.
Wow. Our stories cross paths
They do
in
cross
so many
paths.
different ways. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, go on.
Yeah, this was in
Wilderness
Utah.
therapy.
It was in
Nice.
Utah. So we would go we had 8 days on and 6 days off.
Was it males and females?
It was both.
Was this
Yeah.
one of those programs where you take them out in the desert for a number of days?
No, they're out there for months.
Okay, yeah, my best
They live
friend
out there.
My best friend did a program like that in Utah. It might be the same one.
Okay. This one was called Mountain Homes Youth Ranch.
Okay.
And they've actually since shut down.
Okay. A lot of those facilities. Our facility that we met at is shut down now too.
Is it?
Yeah.
There's a ton. There's a ton out there, and that was really cool, and very extremely challenging. Because I mean, first of all, these kids didn't want to be there, and they really weren't that bad. I mean, they weren't like inner city, violent, criminal teenagers. They were kids who I think needed better parenting.
Yeah, really.
Honestly, and like more attention and care and love in their lives, and so they rebelled, and then they're. I can't speak for all of them, of course, but you know, a lot of these kids ended up there because their parents didn't have the time for them.
Right, didn't want to deal with the kid,
yeah.
you know, acting out. So I'm going to send him off to this thing
to make you conform, and
that's what happened to my best friend. They caught him with pot one time, and they're like, "Nope, we're not going to deal with this. You're going to go to this rehab for months out in the desert."
Did they come in and grab him in the middle of the night and take him out there? Do you know the circumstances around that?
That I don't know, but it makes sense because one year he was in school with us, and then the next he was gone, and I'm like, "Where's my best friend?"
Wow.
Like all of a sudden, like no word, nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, I think they found the pot, and he was gone like within a couple days.
Oh my goodness.
And traumatizing, but he didn't want to be there at first, rebelled when he got there, but by the end of it, he had found a leadership position within that wilderness community, and
Cool.
and now he's one of the most avid outdoorsmen that I know. Like
Wow,
he
cool.
taught me how to rock climb outdoors. We go backpacking all the time. Like he's a survival junkie, and he loves that because of that experience. You know, so he transformed this negative time in his life into something that he's like, you know, fuck you guys. Like I'm gonna take this thing that you're forcing me to do, and I'm gonna rub it in your face and be the best goddamn wilderness person I can. And
That's
I love
incredible.
that about him. Yeah,
that's really cool.
yeah,
And I mean, and that's, you know, a lot of these kids got a lot of benefit from that.
yeah.
You know, it was really amazing to witness kind of the growth from these guys when these kids when they first get there, and they're like, I don't want to be here, and they're rebelling, and then, you know, towards the end of some of these kids' programs, like you could really see the transformation. Something about being in the middle of the woods with nothing around you, disconnected from technology, and having a campfire every night seemed to do the trick, and having good role models around as well.
Not just about disconnecting from all the distraction and technology around, but also it provides an opportunity to reconnect, right? Reconnect with nature, and then, but also eventually reconnect with themselves, because we're all, you know, when we live in this society, we tend to get disconnected from who we are because of all these devices and all these. This is my social media presence and profile, and this is who I am on here, you know, so we get disconnected from who we really are, and being out there, you're left with nothing but yourself and the stars, you know, so you have to reconnect. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. And most of these kids had never been in the woods before, or in the high desert, and so it was terrifying for them at first to be out there, and then the settling, and then the growth that occurred was pretty monumental. It was very, I mean, I think you could say it was mind manifesting. It was psychedelic in a way because, as you mentioned, they got to reconnect with themselves and then witness the grandeur of this earth that we live on, and gain some kind of appreciation for it, I hope. So we did that for a number of years, and then, Shev and I, my wife Sheva and I did that. She did that for 6 months. I was there for about 4 months, and then we were planning our wedding. And then the company shut down, and so we had to cancel our wedding because we couldn't afford to. Because you don't get paid very much to go out there and do that. It's barely a living wage to be a counselor out there. And so we decided, well, hey, we're going to go to California for a few years, and so we had a wedding that we were going to out there in California, and this was back in 2000. This was 2013. Now. Yeah, that's right. So we went to California in 2013, went to our friend's wedding, spent a week on Mount Shasta afterwards, which I don't know if you've been there. It's a pretty magical mountain. A lot of people talk about how there's weird vortexes up there where a lot of strange things happen on Mount Shasta.
That's a bucket list item for me in my life, is to visit some of these spiritual places on the planet, where like they've taken like magnetic readings and things, and just like weird stuff is happening. Like Machu Picchu is one of them, and like they're all over the world, but these very strange vortex spots.
And Shasta is one of those spots.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
One of
I want to go.
I think it's considered one of the Earth's chakras.
Huh.
I forget which one, but it was fun for us because normally you only get to spend 3 days there at the campground, and then we ended up spending, I think, like a week and a half because we somehow were able to get in with the national forest guy that was up there, and he was like, I need to leave for a few days. I like you guys. You need to run the camp. You need to run the campground and just make sure things are cleaned up for a few days. Just make sure people are doing what they're supposed to do out here. And we're like, sweet, we'll do it. And then after that, we traveled up to Mendocino County and lived off grid on Timothy Leary's pilot's former kind of hippie commune in the 70s, and lived there for about 6 months. Off grid. Walter's the old man who lives on the compound there still, who I'm pretty sure
Is this the mansion that Timothy Leary?
I don't think so.
A different one. Okay.
I don't think so. So this is a 200-acre property just south of the town of Mendocino. It's nestled up right up against protected national forest land. It's really cool. About 6 miles inland from the coast.
Wow.
So surrounded by redwoods. And we trimmed marijuana and trimmed marijuana and lived off grid for about 6 months out there. And then that's when our son was conceived, and we were like, okay, we need to grow up now and
go back to society.
And make sure he has a good support network and we have a good support network and we can raise our son well. So we packed it up and drove back.
Now, your time there, in the midst of the conception of your son, was this a time of psychedelic exploration and things like that? Okay.
A little bit.
I imagine being in a space connected to Timothy Leary, I mean, you have to almost take part.
Even just the whole part of the country, honestly, being right near the Bay Area. We had one night where we went out into some friends of ours at the time lived on Haight Street in San Fran, and so we went to San Fran for a weekend and had this incredible LSD journey and walked all the way from the top of Golden Gate Park to the bottom. Found this really cool playground that was built for adults, and had a great experience out there with that. It was really, really cool. And then a little bit back on the land as well. Yeah, we had some experiences too.
Yeah, I'm hoping to book a weekend up at Hunter S. Thompson's cabin.
Where is it?
It's in Aspen.
Is it? Okay.
So his wife is she runs his foundation and like his collects funds and things for scholarships for people, and as part of that fundraising, they're opening up his cabin where he lived on Owl Farm in Aspen for people to come and stay. So I would love to go up there and just kind of put my hands on the wall and soak up his DNA and breathe the same air he breathed, and then also do some psychedelics up there and be in the same mindset that he was in many times up there. Yeah. It's kind of cool to connect with history in that way, and we talk about this on the podcast too, like being able to access the collective consciousness through some of these medicines at much higher rates, and I think being in some of those spiritual vortex spaces can enhance that ability, but also being in places of significant historical value, so like being on Haight Street, being in that environment with that sort of psychedelic history in the bricks can help enhance the setting part of your psychedelic journey, or being on the Timothy Leary property, or being in Hunter S. Thompson's cabin. All these spaces have their own energetic impact. I think that's so cool.
And out there on the land, the trees and the everything was infused with that just coherent collective consciousness of that time. And then the guy who still lived on the land, the old man Walter, kept it alive because he had his own private stash of Leary LSD. And it was a really fun time, and it was a little bit of a challenge coming back to quote unquote reality and like the radio and driving and traffic and all that stuff. Took a little bit of time to get reacquainted with the hustle and the fast pace of living in a city, but it was the right thing, the right move for us. And then was really around the same time that my son was born that I had learned about MAPS and the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies and the work they were doing with MDMA and veterans. And that's when I was like, whoa, I'm very interested in this. Very, very, very interested in this. And for a minute there in 2014, I had started getting into like social media and wanted to getting into flow state. I just learned about Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler. And for your listeners who don't know who they are, they're the executive directors of the Flow Genome Project. So they're
I hope to get them on someday too.
Jamie's cool.
Jamie's
cool. Stephen's really cool too.
I learned a lot about flow states in my master's program in sports psychology because I can't pronounce his first name. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, Canadian researcher, I believe. He's the preeminent father of flow state research, and all you listeners can go out there and search his books out. That's where I was really exposed to flow states, and just like your story again, all these things for me all the pieces started to come together. Buddhism, performance, mindset, mental health, psychedelics, martial arts, philosophy, like all these things come together in my mid-20s to sort of define my path. And it sounds like the same thing happened for you too,
A little bit.
and then finding MAPS and then everything coming together led you to this path that you're on now.
Yeah.
So my podcast app only lets me record hour segments at a time.
Okay.
So we're nearing the end of our first segment, and I'm really excited to get into the next segment with you, where we can really break down Initiative 301 and the Decriminalize Denver effort. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. So stick around, folks, and we'll be right back with more from Kevin Matthews. Awesome, man. Can you use the restroom or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, who's right behind you?
Right in here?
No, this one
This
on
one?
the left. Yep.
Got it. How we doing?
We're doing great. How do you feel?
Good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, we're doing great. And the dogs are doing great. Hey, babe, do you need anything? Okay, cool. Probably be back down what? Oh, okay. That sounds good. You had to get some ice cream for your strep throat. So for all you YouTube viewers out there, you guys get to see this sort of behind the scenes footage of what goes on behind the scenes of the Conversations with the Mind podcast. So we just got a video and audio production software, and in the future we might edit this part out, but if you guys comment and you guys like that you get to see the behind the scenes, then we will for sure keep it going. So yeah, so you guys got to see my wife come into the picture and join the podcast. Hopefully you guys get to see my dogs and my co-hosts join the podcast. I think that's really fun, and I like to involve them as much as possible. So yeah, we're going to get into our second segment with Conversations with the Mind. You feeling pretty good?
Yeah.
You need anything?
I'm good.
You're doing good on your drink?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and start right off with the second segment.
Okay.
Okay, just gotta explore this app just a little bit. All right, we're back from our commercial break with Kevin Matthews for the second segment of episode 40 of Conversations with the Mind. And I want to really, so we went over a lot of backstory all the way up to this point in history, and well, really back to the beginning of your journey into the Decriminalize Denver effort.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping that before we get into what 301 is and what the current state is and what we're going to look forward to in the future, I was wondering or hoping that you could break down the path to decriminalize. And I'm bringing this up for very important reasons. I'm sure you've read Rick Strassman's book.
Some of it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So one thing that Rick Strassman did